Good evening, everyone. I'll call to order the regular evening agenda. I see I have accidentally shredded that as well. Jeez. For June the 14th. Luckily, the first sheet is always the same. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel. All representations to council, written or verbal, thank you, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. Individuals who wish to watch the meeting may view it on the District of Summerland YouTube channel at youtube.com, District of Summerland, live or recorded. Those who have not registered in advance but wish to speak during the public comment opportunities may connect to the meeting by calling the meeting conference line at 778-907-2071, entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. After I have provided everybody who has pre-registered with an opportunity to comment, the floor will be open to those on the conference line. Corporate Officer, do we have any late items? Okay, thank you. Oh, let's get on the right agenda. Could I ask for someone to bring forward adoption of the agenda as written? Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Holmes, all in favor? Thank you. And consider adoption of the following council meetings of May 25th, the public hearing, and then the evening council meeting. Councillor Carlson and Councillor Holmes, all in favor? Great. Okay. And it appears I shredded my mayor's report too, so if you give me a moment, I will just bring that up. Okay, thank you. Tonight's mayor's report begins with recognition for some very deserving individuals, beginning with the announcement of the first round of approved neighborhood small grant award winners. They are Heather Pascata for the Trout Creek Virtual Scavenger Hunt, Jane Campardo for offering Polynesian dance classes, Sherry Taylor, who is coordinating a native plant installation, and Petra Holler, who is using the award to start Okanagan podcast. The Neighborhood Smalls Grants program unites neighbors and sparks creativity. It is put on by the Community Foundation of the South Okanagan Similkameen. Some of the projects are a one-time experience, others are part of an annual community program that will continue to grow. Congratulations to each of you. Summerland Rotary Club also deserves recognition for their continuing work at the West Summerland Station. A cycling map and historical interpretive signage was recently added to the covered picnic area, which serves as a stop for cyclists and hikers using the portion of the Trans-Canada Trail that goes through Summerland. The station was an original stop on the Kettle Valley Railway, and the steam train still travels by. This is a community effort combining Rotary funding and labor with donations of materials and services by local businesses. And finally, but in no way less deserving, congratulations to the Summerland Secondary School class of 2021. I cannot begin to understand what it must have been like to experience your entire final year of high school with COVID-19, but it appears you've taken it in stride. Like the Neighborhood Small Grant Award winners and the Summerland Rotary Club and supporters, you too are an important part of Summerland. Whether you volunteer, participate in sports, or are a loving big brother or sister, your choices make Summerland a better place to live. On behalf of the District of Summerland, I wish you all the very best in whatever road you choose or chooses you. Ending tonight on a much more somber tone, late last month, the Summerland Review released this statement. Following the discovery of the remains of 215 missing children on the grounds of the former Kamloops Indian Residential School, on behalf of the District of Summerland Council and staff, I offer our deepest condolences to the members of the Tk'emlech, Secwepemc, and all Indigenous communities who struggle with the lasting impacts of the residential school system. We are deeply saddened and profoundly disturbed, we are deeply saddened by the profoundly disturbing treatment of these young lives that they endured even in death. Every child matters. The municipality's flags were lowered to half-mast for 215 hours. And my apologies, I have brought up a draft and I don't have the last paragraph. And here it is. Over the last 18 months, I have been part of a working group that has attended a series of workshops that explore how silk and non-silk partners can work together to co-create a vision and a framework for an Okanagan Lake responsibility strategy. This morning, I, Councillor Holmes, and Graham Statt, our CAO, attended the latest session that focused on what we, non-silk people, need to know for understanding our role in reconciliation and our role in the implementation of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. Topics included Indigenous law, knowledge, and leadership, and how Western science can work together to protect and restore the cultural, environmental, and economic values for Okanagan Lake. The information is, of course, transferable to other initiatives in the region as all sectors begin to examine how UNDRIP will be incorporated or will shape new legislation and policy in British Columbia. Thank you. CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. My report this week centers on the work of staff in the district. First, as we have turned the corner into the warmer months of the year, I want to recognize the excellent work of those staff who beautify our community through the landscaping of our boulevards, street sweeping, mowing the grass in our parks, and tending to the maintenance of our recreational assets. They are doing a great job. With it being my first summer living in Summerland, I am very impressed with their pride of service as evidenced through their quality of work. I also wanted to give a shout out to our public works staff who responded quickly and professionally when the water main broke in South Victoria Road a couple of weeks ago. It was a major breakage of a large water line, resulting in the temporary loss of pressurized water to a large part of Summerland. However, the key word here is temporary. Within a couple of hours, they had the break excavated, workarounds planned, alternative fire routes and water sources located, and signs placed in the community, message and maps on the website and Facebook. Within a day or so, the line was fixed and pressurized water service was restored. A few days after that, Interior Health provided the all clear to lift the boil water advisory once the regulated testing procedures were completed. These events are always unforeseen and inconvenient. I am proud of the quick response of staff. As Council is aware, I am leading the development of a code of ethics for all staff. This has been an inclusive process involving all staff throughout the organization for their feedback and input. We have evolved the document through several drafts based on this feedback, and we are now working on our final draft based on the results of 2 all-staff meetings held just last week. We are a values-based organization, so the code will focus on those values, effectively codifying in words what I observe every day throughout the organization. Finally, I wanted to make Council aware that we are keeping in step with the provincial government health orders and safe reopening procedures for the district. Our regular hours of operation for in-person service in all our public works yard in the district have been restored, and any staff that were working from home for a short period of time were phased back into the workplace over the few weeks, so that on June 7th, all staff had returned to the work environment. These steps to regularize our workplace and workforce align with guidance from the province. Residents will notice that we continue to require the use of masks, have hand sanitizer available, and in some places we do limit the number of people within certain places at one time to allow for social distancing. We look forward to those precautions also being withdrawn in line with further direction from public health and likely in step with the progress towards vaccination in the province. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone on the line to comment from the public? No? Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to item 9, development reports. The first one is 9.1, development variance permit for 2107 Tate Street, zoning bylaw variances for setbacks and bike parking, DVP 20-026.
Good evening, Council. So an application for a development variance permit has been received by the District of Summerland. The variances being proposed are in order to facilitate a subdivision and development proposal that would see the existing 27-unit motel on the south portion of the property converted to 25 apartment dwelling units. No significant exterior changes are being proposed for the apartment buildings existing on the property, with only minor floor plan alterations to 4 units, electrical work, and the relocation of 1 staircase. On November 9th, 2020, the application to amend the official community plan and zoning bylaw on the south portion of the parcel received 3rd reading, and with adoption being held until satisfactory completion of the subdivision application. Variances are triggered by the development proposal as a result of the new zoning designation and are required to be approved before the issuance of any building permit. The position of the existing buildings on the site and the adequate provision of bicycle stalls must be brought into compliance with the requirements outlined for the residential high-density zone. The property owner is proposing to subdivide and convert 27 motel units into 25 apartment dwelling units on the southern portion of the property. However, the existing buildings do not fully conform to zoning bylaw yard setback requirements specified for the RHD residential high-density zone. As such, in order to facilitate the proposed subdivision and conversion, a variance has been requested to section 10.9.6 AI and 10.9.6 A3 of the zoning bylaw to reduce the required front and interior side setbacks in order to bring the building into conformance. While reducing setbacks on residential properties is seldom encouraged as it can disrupt from the form and character of a neighborhood, the variances proposed are not anticipated to negatively impact the streetscape. The 2 buildings in question have been existing in place since they were constructed during a 2007 motel expansion. No major changes to the exterior of these buildings will be taking place aside from the relocation of a staircase in the northern part of the western apartment building. The western building is also sited within the required 6-meter front yard setback along Willow Avenue. It is located 4.69 meters from the front property line. The eastern building is sited such that it does not comply with the 6-meter side interior setback. The building foundation is located 5.04 meters from the new interior property line. However, the attached stairs project into the required setback. Stairs are permitted to project into the required interior side setback up to 0.6 meters. As the base of the staircase is 4 meters from the new property line, the variance required to the side setback is 4.6 meters. The stairs The stairs in the western building also project into the required setback, but will be brought into conformance with the proposed 4.6 meter setback. The setback variances are required to legitimize the current siting of the buildings. When the zoning designations change on a property and alterations to non-conforming buildings on that site are requested, it is an opportune time to bring the property into conformance with the zoning bylaw through the approval of a variance. As such, staff are recommending approval of the proposed setback variances. Multifamily developments are required to provide 2 Class A bicycle parking spaces per dwelling unit as prescribed by Section 6.10.1 of the zoning bylaw. Class A spaces are intended to provide secure, long-term bicycle parking that is available only to cyclists whose bicycles are stored in that room or enclosure. In addition, developments are required to provide a minimum of 6 Class B bicycle parking spaces for any development with 10 or more dwelling units. As the complex will house 25 units, the proponent is required to provide 50 Class A spaces and 6 Class B spaces. Due to space constraints on the property, the applicant is requesting to reduce the required 50 Class A spaces to 25 total. The spaces are proposed to be located under several exterior staircases identified on the site plan. These bicycle storage areas will be secured by a fenced compound and provide wall-mounted bicycle storage for up to 25 bicycles. Additionally, the applicant is providing the required Class B bicycle parking stalls on site. The developer has not identified an alternative location for 25 Class A spaces. Should council not support the variance request, the developer will be required to provide bicycle parking elsewhere on the property. Secure and weather-protected bicycle parking facilities positively influence cycling behavior by encouraging people to choose cycling over other forms of transportation. The district zoning bylaw establishes substantial requirements for secure long-term bicycle parking for multifamily developments with 2 spaces per unit required. In contrast, the district's 2019 cycling master plan recommends 1 space per unit only. Although reducing the number of bicycle parking spaces is seldom encouraged, as it may create cluttered spaces and discourage people from using cycling as a viable transportation option, the proposed 1 space per unit still meets the district's cycling master plan recommendation of 1 space per unit, and staff are recommending approval of the variance. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, do you have questions to ask Alex about this? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whether to Alex or to our director. At the time of the rezone that went through, was the applicant aware of the changes, these changes that may be required to move this application forward? Thank you.
Yeah, so through the chair, the applicant was aware of the new zoning designation and the requirements outlined within that RHD zone, for sure.
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. This might be more for the applicant, but perhaps staff can answer. So I'm just wondering how they will allocate the bicycle spaces. Would it be 1 per unit? You could foresee a situation where and there might be 2 people living in a unit and they both have bicycles, and in another unit there might be somebody who has no bicycle, and so I'm just wondering how they balance that and figure all that out.
I do recognize that the applicant's representative, Donna Butler, is on the call. She could perhaps answer that, but I think, you know, there probably would be flexibility, I would imagine, on the number of spaces available, although the requirement is 2 per unit. That's not necessarily how it's managed. Even if it's 1 per unit that is approved through variance, again, that can be perhaps managed differently by the operator.
And then just to follow up with concern, of not creating cluttered spaces, you could foresee that people might decide to lock up their bicycles in the courtyard or the railing behind their unit in the courtyard. And again, would the property owners be okay with that, considering that this is the concern, and are they concerned about that being cluttered or not? Would there be any regulations not allowing that wouldn't allow people to lock up their bikes behind their units like that as well?
Yeah, through your worship, we wouldn't have no regulations for that. So definitely, and we're not going to be actively enforcing the property for where they're parking their bikes. So again, that perhaps might be something that the applicant's representative may be willing to speak to.
Donna, would you care to speak to this question?
I'm not really sure how the owner will actually manage this issue. It's possible there will not be more than 50 bikes in the building, and then there will be a space for everybody who wants one. Many buildings don't allow you to put your bike in your unit or on the decks. Other buildings do. So I just think it's going to be a management issue of the owner once development's underway.
Brad, so what you're saying is that it's not really under the purview of the district? That's something that the owner would have to sort out?
Well, before council tonight is a consideration of a reduction in bike parking that's required by the zoning bylaw. So it is the discretion of council whether they want to consider that variance or not, and that's basically the purview of our decision tonight.
Yeah, sorry. What I meant was what Councillor Holmes is raising in terms of how are they going to sort out who gets the spots and whether or not.
Yes.
That's not.
That's not our purview. No.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Any other? Oh, just a minute. Councillor Barkwell and then Councillor Traynor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think my question is being answered, really. I guess the issue is the same as dozens of other apartments around community, or not this community, but, you know.
Thank you, Councillor Traynor.
So there would still need to be the creation then of 25 stalls for bikes. That's correct? Okay, and those are being proposed to be stored under the 3 staircases? Okay, I guess my 2 questions are, one, is there enough room to store bikes under staircases? And 2, I would assume that the staircases are part of the fire safety, like that's how people would get out of the building. So does having bike storage at all affect the safety of those staircases?
So I'm actually going to throw to Donna Butler, the applicant's agent, who has a little bit more information on the specifications for the bike parking. I also do have a handout of the bike parking, or a rendering of what it would look like under the stair, which I'm happy to pass around to council. And sorry, can you remind me of your second question?
I was just wondering if the bike storage underneath the stairs would affect fire escape. I mean, I assume it wouldn't. I'm just asking the question in case it does.
Sure. So yeah, based on what's being supplied to staff, I don't have any concerns that it would impact the integrity of the stairs. No. Thanks.
Ms. Butler, did you want to give us some more understanding of what the configuration would look like under the stairs for the bikes?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Based on the public comments, we asked the architect this afternoon to explain to us how the bike parking would fit under the stairs, and they sent us the sketch that staff do have. But what they're saying is that the wall under the staircase will be removed, a large gate will be installed, 7 bikes can hang on the wall of the building. There's also room for 2 more bikes to nose under the stairs. So their drawing clearly shows there is room to park at least 9 bikes under the 3 staircases, which is 2 more than they absolutely need, or for the variance, I should say. So yes, it does work. And again, when they apply for the building permit, that drawing will be part of the application. It'll be submitted and approved by staff as meeting the bylaw.
Thank you. I have another question related to the parking of the bikes. It shows on the plan that it's in the presentation slides. So I'll take that off. There are, in the little blue circles, there's 6 Class B spaces. Are those really supposed to be showing at the bottom of the stairs? It shows them as being located at the bottom of the stairs. One, there's some room there. Let's see, it's slide 6 of the presentation slides.
So your question is why is it located at the bottom of the stairs?
Well,
Sorry, just clarify.
given what we just heard about how the bikes that are parked under the stairs will not interfere with safety, fire safety, I'm just wondering about the impact of having 2 bikes at the bottom of each stairwell or staircase, how that might impact.
Yeah, I think although we don't have a setback, and it's hard to tell from that plan, perhaps again, Ms. Butler can comment on that question. There could be enough distance between the bottom of the staircase and the proposed bike rack location for enough for egress. It is hard to tell at this scale. And again, there's no setback shown, but there could be 2 to 3 meters there of distance, perhaps. I'm not too sure.
Can you give us anything more on that, Ms. Butler?
Yes, looking at the drawings, I see that the bike stalls are at the bottom of the stairs, but there's quite a space between the stair and the edge of the concrete there. So the bikes are parked beside the sidewalk, if you like. And, and if there's an issue, they can easily move a few feet one way or the other. There's lots of space in the courtyard where those stalls could be moved, but I believe they're quite free and clear of the bottom of the stairs.
Okay, thank you. It's hard to tell on this little plan. Thank
You're
you for
right,
that.
it
Thanks
is.
for that, Donna. Okay, any other questions? Could I ask someone to bring forward the development variance permit, please? A motion? Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam. That council authorized assurance of development variance permit DVP 20-026 for property located at 2107 Tate Street, legally described as Lot 2, District Lot 488, Soyuz Division Yale District Plan KAP 9794, exempt Plan H641 and 41201. And that a variance to the following sections of the zoning bylaw 2000-450 be granted. Front yard setback section 10.9.6 AI to vary the minimum front yard setback from 6 meters permitted to 4.69 meters proposed. Side interior yard setback sections 10.9.6 AIII to vary the minimum interior side yard setback from 6.0 meters to 4.6 meters proposed. And bicycle parking, section 6.10, table 3, to vary the minimum number of Class A bicycle parking spaces from 2 Class A parking spaces per dwelling unit to 1 Class A parking space dwelling per dwelling unit.
Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Holmes, thank you. Further discussion on this? All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillors Patton, Trainer, and Carlson are opposed, so that motion carries. Okay. Now on to 9.2. Development variance permit for the same address, subdivision and servicing bylaw variances for off-site improvements, DVP 21-015. Bobby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The District of Summerland has received an application for development variance permit 21-015 to vary the off-site works required at subdivision for this property at 2107 Tate Street, most commonly known as the Summerland Motel. You may recognize this from the last presentation. The applicant is proposing to vary section 310 as it relates to sections 6.02 and 6.03 of the District of Summerland Subdivision and Development Servicing Bylaw to facilitate a proposed 2-lot subdivision of the parcel. Section 310 of the SDS bylaw specifies that an owner of a parcel who applies for subdivision must provide, as a condition of subdivision approval, the works that are required to be provided under this bylaw. The variance is specific to item A, which reads on a highway immediately adjacent to the parcel up to the center line of the highway. In order for staff to currently exempt the proposed subdivision from the works required, all items in section 3.14 of the SDS bylaw must be met and be a zone listed in the exemption section, which this currently is not. The parcel is currently rezoning to high density, which is not a listed zone to be exempt, has a frontage length exceeding the 70-meter maximum, and does not have support from the Director of Works and Infrastructure. Table C.2.2 of the SDS bylaw prescribes certain standards in each zone. As noted in the previous slide, the applicant of the subdivision is required to construct the fronting roads along the frontage to the local road standard from the existing center line. Staff feel that this development triggers frontage improvements that are required specifically in road width and concrete curb. This construction required aligns with the urban road character that high density properties should be fronting as prescribed in table C.2.2. The road construction required includes installation of concrete curb, new pavement to center line, and storm infrastructure to collect water from the proposed curb as specified by the previous table and the local road standard illustrated in front of you right now. Sidewalks are not required to be constructed on Tate Street and Willow Avenue as they are not listed in the sidewalks master plan. These photos provide some context on the existing road characteristics and some other physical attributes, including the existing cedar hedge that borders the property. As you can see on the photos as well, the pavement condition on Tate Street is not in fantastic shape, and Willow Avenue is much newer. The red line illustrated on this plan highlights the proposed curb that is required to be constructed. As you can see, the proposed curb does conflict with the existing cedar hedge fronting the property on Willow Avenue. Recognizing this conflict, staff have agreed to allow the applicant to enter into a servicing agreement, which would allow the applicant to plant a new cedar hedge on their property and allow it to establish over 3 years before construction commences, and as a result requires the hedge to come down. Staff were also provided the understanding by the applicant that they would be in support of this. The surrounding existing single-family zones and proposed high-density zones are consistent with local residential areas where local roads are the standard that have been adopted in the Subdivision and Development Servicing Bylaw. The local road standard notes a prescribed asphalt width and includes concrete curb as an acceptable level of service. The reason road upgrades are so often required at Subdivision in Summerland is due to standards not being updated over time. 20 to 30 years ago, when these homes and roads were built, curb was likely not a standard. In this area specifically, although surrounded by rural and agricultural lands, the area is exclusively single-family residences with a full complement of urban services, with the exception of curb at this point. Sanitary sewer was installed in 2015. With the proposed rezone and use of the south portion of this subdivision to high-density apartment accommodation, the area is further considered urban residential area. Staff have also provided council an alternative resolution to Resolution 1 to consider, which would allow for the proposed curb to be installed and only have the remainder width paved on Willow Avenue, given the good condition of the pavement on Willow. The requirements on Tate Street would remain the same, as the pavement is not in good condition along this frontage of the property. Alternative Resolution 1, if council wished to proceed, would provide a cost savings to the applicant. The second portion of this variance application is to consider a turnaround that is required to be constructed at the end of Willow Avenue. Schedule C.3, Section 2.04 of the SDS bylaw requires a cul-de-sac to be constructed at the end of all dead-end roads. Staff have provided an alternative design consideration for the applicant, which would be in the form of a hammerhead turnaround, as opposed to a cul-de-sac bulb. Staff recognize that a cul-de-sac would be extremely impactful to this already established neighborhood. As illustrated on the screen right now, a hammerhead turnaround is required at the south end of Willow Avenue, as noted by the shaded gray area to the right of the screen there. Previously, when the applicants were operating a motel, the access was from Tate Street into the property and out through Willow Avenue. The subdivision that this variance would be facilitating creates a number of new access issues. The applicants are proposing to fence and gate proposed Lot A from proposed Lot B, which on the screen is the left parcel from the right parcel. As a result, access in and out would be from the same access at the end of Willow Avenue. This creates issues for emergency vehicles and waste collection. If emergency vehicles and waste collection cannot or choose not to enter the property via this access, they would need to back out onto Willow Avenue, which creates a hazard to other motorists and pedestrians. It is worth noting that waste collection and emergency vehicles would not have room to turn around on site if all parking stalls are being used. The turnaround construction required as part of subdivision is crucial to safe entrance and exiting of the site, given the restraints that the existing siting of the building poses. Staff from all internal departments that were referred to are all opposed to both of the variances being considered today. A number of written submissions from neighboring residents received today seem to share the same opinion. Staff feel that the alternative design to allow a hammerhead turnaround is a good compromise. In closing, staff recommend that DVP 21-015 be denied in full as presented. Saying that, there are a number of options for council to consider, including the alternative resolution 1 that staff has presented. Please let me know if there are any questions or clarification on any of the resolutions that are in front of you today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bobby. I believe that the applicant would like to speak, or his agent. Karen, do they speak now, or does council ask questions of our staff first?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council can ask questions of staff and then
Okay.
give the applicant an opportunity to speak after.
Okay, and then we can ask questions of her as well. Thank you. So, council, at this time, do you have questions of Bobby? Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. So Willow Ave, it was repaved in 2015 when the sewer went in. Is that correct? That is correct. Yeah. So the resolution number 1 would be repaving that area that was paved in 2015, whereas the alternate resolution, it wouldn't be repaving that part that was paved in 2015. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Okay. It would, alternative resolution would only be the paving required to install the curb. Okay, so what is the benefits of repaving something that's already been paved, that was already paved in 2015? Yeah, so that would obviously just renew an asset that is 6 years old, I suppose. Right. Okay, thank you. And another question, if I may. So I like the idea of allowing 3 years for new cedars to establish, but I'm just wondering, when would the clock start on that? When, like today, or when the cedars are actually planted? Yeah, so staff have agreed, excuse me, have agreed to allow the applicant 3 years from the time that they enter the servicing agreement, which means that the engineered plans would need to be approved and ultimately ready for construction otherwise. So what point would that? What sort of, how, I'm just trying to look in the time frame of the whole project. Is this something that could be? Where does procrastination fit into all this? Yeah, it is ultimately in the hands of the owner as to when that clock would start at this point. If council wished to have some other sort of timing involved, if it was to start from today, that could potentially be worded into a resolution.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question, so we were doing a subdivision because there's a rezoning to high density, and all of this infrastructure is required for that zoning. So if variances were given, and this property, which currently there's no plan to redevelop, but it is to be zoned high density, which means that pretty much anything could be built there in the future as long as it fits those zoning requirements. Would there be, at that point in time, another opportunity to go back and revisit this infrastructure, or is this only at zoning and through subdivision that we can request all of this?
I can take that one, Your Worship, through to Councillor Carlson. We have the ability under the Local Government Act to require improvements to our infrastructure in accordance with our SDS bylaw at both the building permit stage and the subdivision stage. So it's not the rezoning that's the trigger, it's the subdivision application that is the trigger right now for the consideration of the upgrade. So if the owner decided to not pursue subdivision, it could be still something that we would require at the building permit stage when they came to reconvert the building into residential apartments at that time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Patton?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Bobby, can you tell me at the Hammerhead, the portion that goes west, is that district-owned property? Is there a right-of-way along that property line there? How are we getting access to that property for the Hammerhead?
Yeah, through the chair there, there is a unconstructed road right of way along that side of the road.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions? I'll have someone bring forward a motion, please. Oh, I'm sorry, Donna. I am so sorry. Thank you, Red. Donna, you're up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I would like to speak first, and I believe the owners would like to follow up with some of their own comments. So again, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you about the Summerland Motel. Ecor has been working on this for the past 4 months, but we understand the whole idea has been going on for about 1.5 years, maybe almost 2 years. So we all recognize that the subdivision of an existing development is always very challenging, much more challenging than brand new development. And there's lots of bylaw requirements that have to be met. And the owners, as they should, have met all the subdivision requirements, except for the roadworks and the turnaround variances that we're asking council to consider tonight. We also note they've made significant road dedications to widen those roads in the future. We must say, and we do compliment staff in their very positive and professional approach to working on this development. They've been have bylaws to comply with and have done their job professionally, but also have been very cooperative and flexible with the owners. And we do appreciate the efforts of the staff to work on this and to spend all the time they have. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the curb gutter and road paving issue, and then I believe the owners will comment a bit more about the turnaround and some other things. So I'm going to just look at our letter. We have a list of reasons why we feel that a curb and gutter is not needed in this location. First of all, it is primarily an agricultural rural area of Summerland. It's not part of an urban growth area, so we don't see a lot of new development taking place in the residential area here. The Summerland Motel and Apartment is a kind of a unique piece of property sitting out on the highway virtually by itself. It's not part of a urban area, a downtown, or a major city street with lots of other commercial and multifamily development. So it's a bit of an island unto itself here. There aren't any curbs on the adjacent streets in the immediate area. So a curb on the east side of Willow and on Tate would just be an isolated piece of curb. I don't see there'd be a lot of new curb development taking place in the area. So it'd just be one piece of curb in an area without any. We also point out Willow is a fairly short dead-end street. It butts into the agricultural land reserve, so we don't anticipate Willow going anywhere in the future. We don't see a lot of new development traffic here. There is existing development using an existing road. And lastly, the curb and gutter will take out the cedar hedge on the east side of the road. That has been in place for many years, and I think the owner would like to speak to that issue in a minute here. One of the important points we'd like to also make is, I think it's actually identified by staff, is that the subdivision development bylaw already has exemptions in it, so that property owners in certain cases don't have to do off-site works in front of their property. And those are, as I say, outlined in the staff report. There's a list of 4 exemptions with criteria, and the 5th item is a staff opinion. And when we look at the Summerland Motel site, we see that they comply with 3 of the criteria that are in your bylaw to allow an exemption of doing this work. First one is that they're not in an area where there's curbs, so that would be an exemption they would comply with. Secondly, the subdivision does not create more than 1 new lot and has no further subdivision potential. They comply with that exemption. And no new streets are required for this development, the 3rd exemption. It's recognized the one criteria that would allow the exemption is the maximum road frontage of 70 meters. This property does not comply with that. It is 150 meters in length. We recognize that. However, we see that the requested variance for curb gutter and pavement is really not that far off of the exemptions already built into the Summerland bylaw for small subdivisions in kind of remote areas like this. So on that basis, we don't see this as being a big change to the Summerland bylaw. Thank you for that. I believe the owners now would like to speak on their behalf.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Summerland councillors. My name is John Lathy. My wife and I live at 5008 Nixon Road.
We can't hear you any longer, John.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll start again. My wife and I live at 5008 Nixon Road, Summerland, and we've owned and operated the Summerland Motel for some 18 years. I'd like to thank Her Worship and the councillors who made the time to come out and view the site for themselves a few weeks back, and Donna for her presentation on our behalf. The motel is in a rural location sandwiched between 2 large tracts of ALR agricultural land. The buildings in question have been part of the landscape for 12 years and are surrounded by mature landscaping, as is the original motel building. We are in a unique situation as this is not a new development. We are simply reclassifying a building that has been used to house humans for short stays to housing humans for longer term stays. As Donna has pointed out, we have worked with staff to try and make an existing building comply with as many of the rules and regulations as if it were being built from scratch. However, we are requesting a few variances, which we think are necessary to maintain the locality as it is, which is the message that I took away from the public meeting held last November. In the 18 years we have owned the motel, we have done our bit to help build the infrastructure in the community we live in. When we came to the motel in 2003, the whole of Western Trout Creek was on septic fields, as there was no connection across Highway 97 to connect to the main sewer system. We built the sewer connection as part of the construction of the buildings in question. This has enabled the whole of the subdivision of West Trout Creek to now enjoy main sewer service. Also, as part of this construction, we brought 3-phase power to the immediate locality, which is now enjoyed by the residents of Willow Avenue. Before 2008, the closest fire hydrant was at the end of Milkmore Road. We have now provided 2 additional hydrants, one at the end of Willow Avenue and one on the motel site itself, in addition to which the new building was fully sprinkled. And today, while the motel site is fully serviced with mains gas, Willow Avenue is not. Their gas requirements are met by having propane trucked in to fill up their on-site propane tanks. Due to our actions, as of August the 15th this year, this will no longer need to be the case, as Fortis Gas, have agreed to put in a gas main along Willow Avenue, affording the residents access to main gas if they so wish. So we have not been backwards in coming forwards in helping improve the provision of services to the surrounding area. In asking for these variances, we are not looking for special treatment. However, to comply with the 2 specific bylaws, i.e. curbstones and drains, and the hammerhead turnaround, would entail the loss of hedgerow and mature landscaping, which runs along the whole of the eastern side of Willow Avenue and provides privacy and screening to the motel gardens and to our neighbors, and contributes greatly to the rural streetscape of the road. While the base of the hedge is largely on our property, it has grown over the roadway in the past. To mitigate this, we have recently pruned the hedge severely back to reduce its impact on the road. And I'm pleased to say that new growth has already started to sprout. With a 1.9 meter dedication, the hedge will largely be on Willow Avenue Road right of way. However, the district does provide an encroachment agreement for these types of situations, which should not be an issue as we have always maintained and irrigated all of this hedge. It is not uncommon in Summerland for landscaping to be allowed to grow over adjacent boulevards. The hedgerow itself provides a green solution to all drainage requirements, and Willow Avenue is wider than many streets in Trout Creek, which have far more houses on them than the 3 on Willow Avenue. None of these have curbstones. Regarding the turnaround at the end, for many years there has been a sign at the beginning of Willow stating no through road and no turnaround beyond this point. This has worked well, as to my knowledge, there have been no incidents of people getting stuck, as there is also plenty of paving provided at the end of Willow by driveway entrances and a lane that runs along the farm fence. So to tarmac over more shrubbery to fix a problem that doesn't exist seems to me a bit unnecessary. Regarding emergency vehicles, we have made provision for a gate to enable emergency vehicles to drive through the car park if they need to. I hope in coming to your decision, you recognize that we are indeed trying to benefit the community by providing 25 more residential units while not in any way compromising the benefits or trying to change this rural area. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Council, questions of the proponent? All right. Oh, Councillor Holmes.
I have a question, but it's probably more for staff.
Okay, does anyone have a question for the proponents? Okay, thank you. Please go ahead, Councillor Holmes.
I was just wondering, how do garbage collection trucks turn around? Do they turn around in Willow right now, or do they back out? Through the chair. The waste collection vehicles that collect for the single family residences on Willow, I do not believe that they go through the proponent's property to turn around. I'm not sure if they turn around at the end of Willow or if they back out currently. But currently for collection of the Summerland Motel, they have waste bins on Tate at their entrance. So hopefully that helps.
Just to further add to Bobby's response to, like, the part of this application is the subdivision, which will create a barrier halfway through their common property, which was used for access to the residential area that's being proposed from Tate. So, you know, if there was the requirement for a garbage pickup truck, for example, to go to the new proposed multifamily dwellings, they wouldn't be able to access through the common lot with this proposal. They'd have to go through Willow in that access to the south. Thanks.
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, just so I mean, I live on a dead end street, but it's only 2 houses. And when the garbage truck comes to those 2 houses, they have to put their bins on the opposite side of the street because the garbage truck comes to that, and they can't, you know, that's the way it's faced. And so they have to wheel it across the street, put on the opposite side of the street. And then the garbage truck isn't able to turn around at that dead end. So it backs out to the next intersection and comes. But that's only 2 houses. So if the same thing has to happen on Willow, which is 150 meters, I believe, I just don't see how logistically that works. So I was just kind of curious how it works now. So.
Okay, Counsel, any other questions of staff? Would anyone care to bring forward a motion, please? Councillor Barkle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Deal with one thing at a time. And I'd like to bring forward, to put on the table, alternative resolution 1, that development variance permit DVP 21-015 at 2107 Tate Street, legally described as Lot 2, District Lot 488, OBYD Plan KAP 9794 to vary off-site improvement requirements prescribed in Section 310, servicing requirements at Subdivision 6.02 highways and walkways and 6.03 sidewalks, curbs, and gutters of Subdivision, and Development Servicing Bylaw number 99-004 to only require installation of concrete curb and remainder paving from the existing edge of asphalt to the face of the proposed curb to the local road standard on Willow Avenue be approved. It's the longest one I've read for a long time.
Thank you, Councillor Barkle. Seconder? Councillor Holmes. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Barkle.
I want to speak to the motion. It seems to me that this is everything that staff are requesting for this aspect of it, other than to repave a relatively new road. And the cost benefit of repaving that brand new, well, almost new road, which gets very little traffic and should last a very long time, just doesn't seem to be there for me. So obviously I'm going to support this resolution.
Anyone else care to speak to this? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In alternative 1 does not speak to the hammerhead. On alternate resolution?
Sorry, the hammerhead portion is a separate, it's number 2 in the motion. They're two separate, it's split.
Okay, so
yes.
We're not getting rid of the hammerhead based on.
No, this is this is only for number 1.
I should
yes.
wait.
Okay. Anyone else? I'd like to say that it seems to me that this is a pretty good compromise to only pave from the edge of the asphalt. As it's been pointed out, it's fairly new. And I understand why the curb needs to be there. The option to have 3 years to get some cedars in there, ideally they're in there fairly quickly and have 3 years to grow. We all know how quickly, with adequate water, a cedar hedge will grow. I think that, to me, that sounds like a pretty good compromise. You know, in terms of what's there in the alternative resolution, that would be as far as a compromise that I would feel comfortable with, but I am comfortable with this. So I will vote in favor of this portion being approved. Anyone else? Okay, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Patton is opposed, so the approval of that variance is passed. And then now on to that second portion that has to do with the hammerhead. Councillor Patton, would you like to read that or bring forward some motion to deal with that?
Sure, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
The development variance permit DVP 21-015 at 2107 Tate Street, legally described as Lot 2, DL 488, ODYD Plan KAP 9794, to vary offsite improvement requirements prescribed in Section 3.10, servicing requirements of Subdivision 6.02, highways and walkways of subdivision and development servicing bylaw number 99-004 to eliminate the requirement to construct a cul-de-sac or alternate turnaround facility at the end of Willow Avenue be denied.
Thank you. Seconder for that, Councillor Holmes. Okay, and you wanted to speak to that?
Thank you. I will be going with staff in regards to this to deny this. The hammerhead itself is in the BC Building Code, which and it talks about fire department access to buildings, which is the hammerhead in this regard. So if there is an incident that does affect the new 25 units where the fire department has to go down Willow, the means of turning around is very limited. And with the owners putting the chain link fence between, we'll call it Lot A and Lot B, it severely hinders the fire department's ability to access an incident. And so for this case, I believe that the hammerhead is required, and I will be going with staff's recommendation here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patton. Anyone else? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously that variance be denied. Thank you. On to 9.3, development variance permit for 5607 and 5811 Giants Head Road, DVP 21-010.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
I think that's
hello
the applicant.
Okay. Sir, if we could first hear from staff, District of Summerland staff, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So an application was received for a development variance permit for properties located at 5607 and 5811 Giants Head Road to rebuild and expand the FortisBC Trout Creek substation. The property's future land use designations are agricultural and they're zoned A1. As you can see from these images, these land uses are fairly consistent with the surrounding area. Part of the properties also fall within a watercourse development permit area. And with respect to this proposed development, the applicant received provincial approval for the proposed works on May 7th, and then also a watercourse development permit was issued on May 26th by the district. So the applicant applied to the Agricultural Land Commission for a non-farm use application to expand the substation onto a portion of 5811 Giants Head Road through a statutory right-of-way. This application was considered by Council on February 8th and forwarded to the ALC for consideration, and that was approved on March 25th with a few conditions which I'll speak to in a moment. Oh, and then just to provide a bit of a reference, so the area outlined in red is the proposed area of expansion on the left, and then the image on the right is the proposed site plan and the two towers that they're proposing to build, as well as some other infrastructure. So these photos just provide a bit of context to the existing Trout Creek substation, and then also the area of the proposed expansion, which is identified on the images to the left. So as I mentioned, the applicant is proposing to rebuild and expand the Fortis substation. This substation has reached the end of its economic life, and the risk of failure will only increase in time. The proposed siting of the substation towers and control room project into the setbacks. This kind of utility isn't listed as one of the exemptions from setback requirements in the zoning bylaw, and as such, a variance is required, or the applicant can comply with district regulations. And because there are two separate parcels, there are separate variances for each of the properties. So the areas of encroachment are highlighted in yellow on the image in the left. So for 5607 Giants Head Road, this is the location of the existing substation, so the lower portion of that image. The requested variances are a reduction to the front yard setback from 7 meters to 2.9 meters, and that's for a tower. And then also to the rear yard setback from 7 meters to 3.77 meters, and the side yard setback, the interior side yard setback from 4 meters to 0 meters. And then with respect to 5811 Giants Head Road, the requested variances are to reduce the front yard setback from 7 meters to 3.43 meters, and the side yard setback from 1.8 meters to 2.7 meters. Both properties are also requesting a variance to increase the maximum height of a fence from 1.8 meters to 2.7 meters. And these images here just provide a bit of an example of what they would be building. So it's a concrete fence, and then they would have some sort of decorative detail, either, the wood design or the stones in the image to the right. So Fortis is currently working on preliminary designs and estimating for replacement for Summerland medium voltage equipment, and this will be presented to Council once it's complete. Part of the proposed works also include the sharing of the control building between the district of Summerland and also Fortis. And overall, the proposed design is in alignment with the Summerland electric utility plans for the Summerland assets at the Trout Creek substation. So with respect to the fence, the substation currently has a 2.4 meter chain link fence with barbed wire and is surrounded by cedar hedges. Fortis is planning to replace the fence with a 2.7 meter tall concrete fence, which would provide security for district and Fortis owned equipment and also protect the public from hazards. The ALC approval of the non-farm use included replacing the vegetative buffer as a condition of registering the statutory right-of-way. However, the location of the existing hedge presents a potential hazard potential for hand-to-hand hazard for someone who touches the fence and the vegetation simultaneously. So Fortis plans to remove the hedge, and they're also in the works with both property owners surrounding them to be able to come up with a different kind of vegetative buffer as part of the sale through the statutory right-of-way, and also complying with the ALC conditions for registering the SRW. And then with respect to setbacks, reducing setbacks has the potential to disrupt the form and character of a neighborhood, or potentially allowing imposing structures within the pedestrian realm. In this instance, the surrounding area is largely agricultural, and the impact on neighboring properties is anticipated to be minimal. 6303 Hilborn Avenue, the property that could be most impacted by this development, as an example, already abuts the substation, which has similar equipment. And the area of the proposed expansion is occurring north of that property as well. So again, it's unlikely that it would have a direct kind of visual impact or anything like that. The 0 meter interior setbacks for both 5607 and 5811 Giants Head Road are being recommended due to both properties being operated by Fortis. So reducing this setback to 0 meters allows the two properties to essentially function as one being owned by the district and then the other being owned by Fortis. So additionally, complying with setbacks would require Fortis to develop a greater portion of agricultural land to accommodate their infrastructure. The proposed layout provides opportunities to create a more resilient and reliable system without further encroachment onto arable farmland. In this instance, meeting setback regulations doesn't align with district policies that strive to protect agricultural land. So to conclude, staff recommend that the requested variances be granted to create a more resilient and reliable system that meets the current and future electrical needs of Summerland. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions of staff, council? Or if you have questions of the proponent, you can ask them as well. Oh, I guess there's just Michael is left on the line. Okay. I will ask if someone will bring forward a motion, please. Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a question first, if I may. So this 9-foot concrete fence, I mean, really, it's more of a wall. And you know, when you look at the examples of the photos, it looks like, reminds me of when I was in Berlin in 1990 and they were knocking that one down. And so I'm just wondering, is if there is any way to make it less ugly. I know nobody lives there, so people aren't going to see it on a day-to-day basis, but it's I'm sure it's kind of shocking seeing something like that in a town like this.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so for the fence, we are currently working with the 2 surrounding property owners directly adjacent to those properties, and we will obviously be reinstating those cedar hedges along the east, north, and west side. The fence along the roadway, it can be beautified, I guess you could call it. It can be painted a color, or Fortis would be even open to possibly some murals to represent the district of Summerland. I don't know what that entails, but yes, there are opportunities to make that less prison-like.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Holmes, are you still willing to bring forward the motion?
Sure.
Thank you.
Council authorized issuance of development variance permit DVP 21-010 for properties located at 5607 and 5811 Giants Head Road, legally described as Lot 1, District Lot 974, Soyuz Division, Yale District Plan 37421, and Lot 17, Block A, District Lot 974, Soyuz District, Yale Plan 268, except plans 23317 and 37421, and that variances to the following sections of zoning bylaw 2000-450 be granted for the subject properties. I'll just read the addresses again rather than going through the 5607 Giants Head Road, front yard setback prescribed in sections 8.1.6 AI is varied from 7 meters to 2.9 meters. Rear yard setback prescribed in section 8.1.6 A1 A2 is varied from 7 meters to 3.77 meters. Side yard setback interior prescribed in section 8.1.6 A3 is varied from 4 meters to 0 meters. Fence height prescribed in section 5.5.6A is varied from 1.8 meters to 2.7 meters. And that lot 17, block district, lot 974 is Soyuz Division, Yale Plan 268, except plans 23317 and 37421. 5811 Giants Head Road. Front yard setback prescribed in sections 8.1.6 A1 is varied from 7 meters to 3.43 meters. That side yard setback interior prescribed in section 8.1.6 A3 is varied from 4 meters to 0 meters, and fence height prescribed in section 5.5.6A is varied from 1.8 meters to 2.7 meters. I think I'll drink.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. You need a drink of water now, I bet. Councillor Van Elfen, you're seconding. Thank you, sir. Okay, any further discussion on this one? All in favor? That is approved unanimously. Thank you. And now on to 9.4, zoning bylaw amendment for 11510 Blair Street, Z21-006.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So an application was received for a site-specific text amendment at 11510 Blair Street to allow an additional dwelling on the property to be used by the owner's parents and to site that dwelling outside of the farm home plate. The property's OCP future land use designation is agricultural, and it's zoned A1, which is fairly consistent with adjacent land uses within this area. And the property also falls within the Agricultural Land Reserve, and as such is subject to Agricultural Land Commission regulations. These regulations are particularly relevant to this application because in 2019, the province updated the Agricultural Land Commission Act to better protect ALR land for farming. One key change included directly addressing the construction of mega mansions and speculations in the ALR by limiting the size of primary residences and authorizing the ALC to approve applications for additional residences for non-farm use. This change included a phase out of a long-standing rule that had allowed ALR landowners to place a small secondary residence in the ALR without ALC approval, so long as it was a manufactured home for immediate family members. The deadline to site a manufactured home was recently extended from July 31st, 2021 to December 31st, 2021. So the ALR use regulation classifies additional residences as a permitted non-farm use that may be prohibited by local governments. At this time, the district zoning bylaw only allows additional dwellings in the A1 and A2 zones for secondary suites or temporary and full-time farm workers accommodation with ALC approval. As such, the applicant is requesting a site-specific text amendment to allow an additional residence for the placement of a manufactured home for their parents in accordance with the ALR use regulation. And with the site plan provided, the area highlighted in yellow is the proposed location of the additional residence, with the cluster of buildings for the main residence kind of just south of that area. So these photos here just provide a bit more context to the site. So the top two images are the proposed location of where the owners would like to site the manufactured home, and the bottom three are more closely located towards the main house and illustrate some of the fruit trees that they have on site as well. So the applicant has noted that the manufactured home would be used by their retired parents, allowing an additional residence on ALR land for a relative. Particularly an aging parent was identified in the Ministry of Agriculture's 2020 policy intentions paper on residential flexibility in the ALR. Although there is little policy direction or guidance from the ministry or the ALC at this time, the requested amendment currently meets ALC regulations. The intent of locating residential buildings and structures within a farm home plate is to reduce the minimum or to reduce the impact of development on arable farmland. The applicant is proposing to locate the additional dwelling at the northern end of their property and outside of the farm home plate. And the rationale for this location is twofold. The first is that that particular area isn't suitable for farming due to a frost pocket, and it also provides privacy from the principal dwelling and also for the neighboring property. Staff recognize that there have been concerns about additional dwellings not being used for their intended purpose, such as farm worker accommodation being used for short-term vacation rentals. And to address this concern, staff recommend that a restrictive covenant be registered on title to ensure that the dwelling is to be used by the owner's immediate family and that the dwelling is removed when that use is no longer required for family purposes. And using restrictive covenants in this way to limit the use of a building is a fairly common practice on agricultural land to have some more added protections. So the Agricultural Advisory Committee considered this application on May 21st. Members thought that the use of the building should also include farm workers and that the restrictive covenant should include this particular use. It should be noted, though, that farm worker accommodation requires ALC approval for a non-adhering residential use, and this would trigger a separate application process. So they're two very different uses. Members also were generally satisfied with the proposed location of the additional dwelling being located outside of the farm home plate due to the frost in this area, but they also raised some concerns about the precedents that this application could set. So at this meeting, the Ag Committee recommended that the site-specific text amendments be endorsed by Council and that the restrictive covenant be registered on title to ensure that the manufactured home is to only be used by an immediate family member or for farm workers, and that it be removed when it is no longer needed. And then the Advisory Planning Commission considered this application at their meeting on May 28th. The APC noted that the requirement for a restrictive covenant may be too onerous and difficult to enforce. Others also raised concerns about the driveway access and the impact on the farm. That being said, the APC also recommended that the site-specific text amendment be supported and that a restrictive covenant be registered on title to limit the use of the manufactured home. So overall, there's been an identified need to have more flexibility for residences within the ALR, and staff recommends that the site-specific text amendment be given first and second reading, and that a public hearing be scheduled for July 12th. Additionally, staff also recommend that a restrictive covenant be registered on title to limit the use of the additional dwelling to the owner's immediate relatives, and that it be removed once the use is no longer needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Traynor.
I just have a question for clarification. At the Agriculture Advisory Committee, their recommendation, the second one, that says a restrictive covenant be registered on title to ensure it's immediate family or for farm workers. I thought you said farm workers was a separate, like a whole other thing. So I'm just wondering why that's included, that wording in there.
Through the chair. So they included that in their recommendation, and it was only after that meeting that, we realized that it triggers separate application processes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we just wanted to clarify that as well, despite their comments.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I note that this isn't in Summerland's bylaw. I'm wondering if have we already experienced this in Summerland? Are there other mobile homes used for family members on other ALR properties in this community? And further to that, do you know how long this has been an ALR rule? Because it seems kind of strange to me that it's if this is the first one, and it's soon to not be an ALR rule anymore. I'm just wondering if I got that straight.
Yeah, through the chair. So I think one of the reasons why staff have started to see an influx in applications is because of this deadline, where a lot of people have been more interested in having a modular home located on their site. I can't speak to previous applications. It could be possible that council consideration wouldn't necessarily be required. Like if the modular unit was to be used by farm worker accommodation who happen to be immediate relatives, that would be an instance in which council consideration wouldn't be required. But,
okay, so just to follow up on that though, this has been a rule in the ALC Act for a very, very long time, but it has never been a rule in Summerland's bylaw during the time that it's been in the ALC. That's correct? And do we have a history on why? Why? I know that not all of Summerland's bylaws match the ALC ones, but do we know why this one in particular is not part of Summerland's bylaw?
Brad?
Yeah, I can try to answer that one. I can't comment on, actually, we haven't done a thorough historical review of our zoning bylaw on this topic, so I can't comment on if it's ever been allowed. within our zoning bylaw, the use of a manufactured home for family purposes, but it has been something that has been allowed historically by the Agricultural Land Use Reserve regulation for family purposes. It's only changing this December 2021. Right now, this is something that has been already identified. For example, at the Development Process Improvement Committee, they've had some discussions on this topic of it being an inconsistency with our zoning regulations and the Agricultural Land Use Reserve regulation, where we allow a manufactured home for temporary farm worker purposes or an additional dwelling for farm help, but we don't allow for family purposes. And with the ALC, it's vice versa. They allow for family purposes, but not for farm working purposes. So this is an area where we do want to explore with our review of agricultural regulations in September of this year. That's what we're projecting to initiate that review.
So just to follow up then, would that suggest we would, I guess I'm just confused as to why we would spend 6 months rushing through something that's not going to be a rule anymore if they're taking it out of the Land Commission Act. It seems like, do we know why they're taking it out? Is it going to be replaced with something else? I'm just a little bit concerned that we're going to get, 500 applications for mobile homes on farmland, and we're going to have to deal with that before December 2021. I hope that's not the case, but I fear that we may, I feel like it's been there for a reason, and there's a tiny window, but we don't allow it in Summerland. So if we start allowing it, we're all of a sudden going to have all of this happen, and then the ALC is not going to allow it anymore. It just seems like bad planning, but I'm not sure. I wasn't part of the conversation at the Ag Advisory Committee meeting. So I'm just trying to comprehend. Like you said, you've had a few. Have you had a dozen? Have you had 2 dozen? Like, is this going to open some crazy can of worms?
Through the chair to Councillor Carlson, I think that every application can be evaluated on its own merits. I don't think that one application in itself is to be a windfall for other proposals coming forward. I think that I think the Agriculture Advisory Committee, and if I remember the discussions, there were merits to this proposal based on kind of how it was laid out on the property, the circumstances of their family situation, which is a factor. Yeah, I don't think that it's a done deal that if another proposal came forward, that just because this one got approved, that others would be, as an example. And so that's the advantage of a site-specific rezoning application, is that council can evaluate merits of each application that comes forward on its own merits, rather than it being a blanket approval in our zoning bylaw.
Okay. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll put the motion on the table.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you.
That zoning bylaw amendment 11510 Blair Street, bylaw number 2021-022 be read a first and second time, that a public hearing be held on July 12th, 2021 to receive public feedback on zoning bylaw amendment 11510 Blair Street, bylaw number 2021-022, and that further a restricted covenant be registered on title to limit the use of the additional dwelling to the owner's immediate relatives as outlined in the Agricultural Land Reserve use regulations, and that it be removed once the use is no longer needed.
Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Holmes. Any discussion on this? Councillor Patton.
More of a comment, Madam Mayor. I remember, just for Councillor Carlson, I can remember when the ALC brought this in and gave the dates. As a matter of fact, I emailed Councillor Van Elpen and I said that families are now allowed in ALC to have modular and mobiles. Prior to, they were only allowed to have a Z240, which is a mobile home on wheels. And then the ALC changed that. So it has morphed, but I think back previous to our director, it wasn't entertained by our senior management to allow that type of housing. So there was a disconnect between Agricultural Land Commission rules and District of Summerland, sorry. So I'm hoping that our director can maybe look and review and maybe get things a little bit closer and in sync so that we don't have these disconnects where these type of applications come in after the fact and kind of catch you off guard, even though it's been a long-standing practice with the Land Commission. Anyway, that was just my 2 cents. Thanks.
No, 2 cents are good. Anyone else? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. How are you feeling about this being your last council meeting, Arian? Not that I wanted to put you on the spot, but I do want to recognize the fine service that you offered to the district while you've been here. Thank you.
It's been a privilege for the past year and a half, so thank you very much.
Yeah. All the best in your new role and your new community. Okay, on to the last of our development reports, and 9.5 zoning bylaw amendment agritourism accommodation Z21-008.
Good evening, Council. This is my report, and I've got a presentation prepared. I'm here before you to discuss a proposal actually from the Summerland Chamber of Commerce that was received here by district staff on March 26, 2021. The proposal was to allow for a temporary camping style agritourism accommodation use to be allowed through all of the district's agricultural lands within our zoning bylaw, and subject to the following conditions that the Chamber of Commerce has proposed. And we did also attach the Chamber of Commerce's original letter of correspondence that states these conditions, which I'll state here: to limit stays to self-contained recreational vehicles, that a 3-night maximum stay be the maximum amount, consistent stay for each tourist that would be taking part of this proposal, to limit the number of self-contained spots to 3 per night, that the farm parcel size must be over 3 to 5 acres. And the Chamber also proposed, and I have a mistake here, that a fee for this service also be required in the amount of $50 to $100 payable to the Chamber of Commerce. Sorry, I should have stated the Chamber of Commerce in my presentation slides was requested. So in staff's review of this request, we reviewed the Agricultural Land Use Reserve regulation, and the agritourism is defined in the land use regulation for the ALC as a designated farm use allowable in the ALR. And what that means is as it's designated as a farm use means that local governments cannot prohibit this type of use from occurring on agricultural land. And so the activity itself is defined within the land use regulation, and there's a number of different examples used to clarify what the ALC means as a agritourism activity. And I'm not going to go through each one, but just some examples: a tour of agricultural land, such as like an educational tour, harvest festivals that are seasonal in nature, and then also like corn mazes as an example is also used. In addition to the activity, they also define agritourism accommodation in the land use regulation which is a separate use that would be is not designated as a farm use, so it can be restricted by local governments through their regulations, and up until this point, it has been restricted by our zoning bylaw within the District of Summerland. The accommodation use must be specific to an agritourism activity, and it's subject to the following conditions within the land use regulation. It's located on land assessed as farm. The total developed area for the accommodation use cannot be larger than 5% of any agricultural parcel. The land use regulation also states that the maximum amount of accommodation units and sleeping units is 10 on one parcel, and that the accommodation is only provided on a seasonal or short-term basis. Some additional conditions written in the land use regulation as well is that they've further defined what a sleeping unit is, and a sleeping unit can be either a bedroom within a building or a structure, or a campground stall, which is the proposal from the Chamber of Commerce. So as such, staff in reviewing all this considers that allowing temporary campground stays throughout all agricultural lands in the district through a zoning bylaw amendment, which is before council today, and as proposed by the Chamber of Commerce, can be considered, but only if those stays are associated with an agritourism activity, and as well that the agritourism activity is subordinate to the primary agricultural use of the property within the agricultural land use regulation. So just getting further into what our bylaw states within the zoning bylaw, we actually do have a definition within our zoning bylaw for agritourism accommodation already, which was put into the bylaw at their last administrative update with last fall, which means the provision of short-term sleeping accommodations for tourists on a property classified as farm under the BC Assessment Act. Typical uses include, but are not limited to, farm, bed and breakfasts, seasonal farm cabins, campsites, and recreational vehicle sites. So we feel that this definition could still apply for this proposal. However, like this use is not right now listed within the district's agricultural zones. Right now, if a proposal was to come forward to our department, in order to allow for it to occur within a property, we would be required to process either a temporary use permit, if it was proposed to be a temporary use as on a trial basis, as an example, or through a site-specific rezoning amendment for that specific parcel. Both of these processes can take a significant time period to get in place. We target a 3-month time frame to go through a rezoning process, but sometimes it can go longer than that, from 3 to 5 months. And I think it's for that reason the Chamber of Commerce is recommending that this be added to our bylaw so that it can be a much more streamlined and cost-effective process for getting an agritourism accommodation on a piece of agricultural property. So the proposed bylaw amendments in front of council tonight is to add agritourism accommodation as an accessory use in the A1 agricultural small acreage zone and the A2 agricultural large acreage zone. We've also developed a specific use regulation section, which is provided here, section 716, to be added to the zoning bylaw. And I'll just quickly roll through what the requirements of the specific use regulation states here. Like I already mentioned, that agritourism accommodation is permitted, but only as an accessory to the principal use of agriculture, which is an agricultural land use regulation. And then as well, that the maximum parcel coverage for the agritourism accommodation use is 5% of the total parcel area, and that's for whether it's a campground or if it's a building or both. That maximum amount of 5% cannot be exceeded. And then the following requirements deal specifically with a building or a structure for agritourism accommodation purposes. That the minimum parcel size is 2 hectares, that the building be located within the farm home plate, that the bedrooms be contained in one building, that the maximum number of bedrooms is 4, that the maximum number of consecutive stays within this structure for one person is 10 days. That no bedroom be larger than 20 meters squared, and that no kitchen is permitted to be included within a bedroom. And then finally, that one parking space is required per bedroom for the agritourism accommodation building. For specifically with regards to the use of a campground stall for agritourism accommodation and kind of following the direction from the Chamber of Commerce for this proposed use, we have developed section 716.4, which again, minimum parcel size is 2 hectares. The campground use is also to be cited within the Farmhome plate. That the campground use be cited 10 meters from all property lines. The maximum number of campground stalls is 3 on one property. The maximum number of consecutive stays per person is 3. That no water and sewer infrastructure be constructed for the proposed accommodation use. And that the use of the campground stalls be limited to only the months of May to September every year. Finally, as well, we are also proposing an amendment to Business License Bylaw 95-004. This amendment, we recognize that if council was to consider this in order to ensure that there's still some control over these type of operations in terms of complying with our zoning regulations, in addition to these regulations within the business license bylaw, that we issue an annual business license every year to confirm with the operator that it will be continued to be operated in conformance with our zoning bylaw. So we are proposing that this be an annual business license that we would require the operator to renew. And at that time, we would review it and ensure that it's being still operated within conformance. In addition to that as well, we're also listed a number of additional requirements that we would evaluate prior to issuing the first license for a proposed operator of this type of a use through a business license. And this was some of the recommendations from the Agriculture Advisory Committee, which I'll get into, but that there be an agreement signed with the person or individual carrying the business to ensure that all patrons that are visiting their farm be required to sign a disclosure statement. That the agreement also state that any patrons to their operation do not trespass onto adjacent agricultural parcels that are not in their care and control. That the person carrying the business as well provide notification to their adjacent property owners prior to the issuance of the license. And then also that the person or individual carrying the business provide proof of additional insurance and liability protection for the hosting of patrons on their private property. So those 4 requirements. So just in terms of consultation process, we went on April 16th, 2021 to the Agriculture Advisory Committee. They subsequently provided a number of comments that I provided in my report to council, but ultimately provided the following resolution: that the district initiate a zoning bylaw amendment for a 1-year trial of this proposed addition to our zoning bylaw that includes monitoring and input from the committee and reporting back to the committee for comments regarding the addition of agritourism accommodation as an accessory use in the agricultural use zone. So with this recommendation, staff are also recommending that we consider this as an amendment to our zoning bylaw on a trial basis, as kind of like a pilot project that we would report back probably within a year to year and a half time frame, so that we can evaluate the effectiveness of the changes and report back to council to determine if they want to make any changes to our zoning bylaw at that time, to either pull this use out or to continue having it within the zoning bylaw. Following that meeting on April 16th, the issue was brought back to the committee by the Agriculture Advisory Committee Chair. There were some additional comments made at that meeting with regards to concerns of the issues that might occur if this operation was occurring adjacent to other agricultural properties, and that led to a lot of those requirements that are currently proposed as part of the business license amendment bylaw that we've drafted. Following that, we went to the Advisory Planning Commission on May 28th, 2021. There are some of their comments that they recognize that there are differences in types of farms that will pursue this. That they stated that farmers should be able to decide if this will work for them or not. Perhaps as well that even the staff proposal may be too restrictive. They agreed that with no hard infrastructure requirement as part of the specific use regulations, but recommend that we do allow for power to be connected, and actually that's actually a change we made as well to the proposed amendments so that power can be connected. And they also recommended that a business plan be provided prior to the issuance of a license, but they subsequently provided support to initiate a zoning bylaw amendment to include the accessory use of agritourism accommodation in the agricultural use zones. As well, we've received some letters of correspondence from the Ministry of Agriculture and the Agricultural Land Commission, and those are attached for Council's benefit in their package. Again, we've also made changes to the proposed regulations based on the comments provided from both bodies. So what's before Council tonight has accommodated all of their proposed changes from both the Ministry and also the Agricultural Land Commission. And some of their comments was to reduce the number of bedrooms from 5 to 4, which we've done. We've pulled out and confirmed that if you had a campground and a building, the total amount of area has to be still less than 5%. They also agreed with the Agriculture Advisory Committee's proposal to have disclosure statements signed by patrons, and also that no trespassing be allowed on adjacent farm parcels. Again, the Agricultural Land Commission was supportive of allowing it as a permitted use, as it is allowed use within the Agricultural Land Use Reserve Regulation. And again, similar comments that the total use has to be less than 5% of a parcel. They did note some concerns, I think, from other jurisdictions where there has been potential for this type of use to be converted into a secondary residence on agricultural property. So that would be something, again, we'd have to confirm with every renewal of each license that gets approved, that it is still being used as what was proposed originally, so that it does not get converted, especially if it's a building, into a secondary residence on the property. So in conclusion, our recommendation, I do have some comments with regards to explaining our rationale for are recommended to proceed for first and second reading. We, at staff level, we feel that the allowance for agritourism activities and associated agritourism accommodation uses throughout all zones zoned to agriculture within the district is seen as a positive regulatory change to allow for local agricultural operators and producers to diversify their business operations and incorporate additional revenue streams to their operations. Agritourism is a growing industry throughout BC, and the district is unique in having an abundance of agritourism assets in our community that can be marketed and promoted to the farming for the farming community. In addition, the district lacks suitable tourist accommodation supply within our boundaries, and then it can be expected that the demand for tourist accommodation will grow exponentially with the opening up of COVID-19 restrictions. In this sense, this regulatory change can be both a positive for the farming community and for the tourism industry, and can further complement existing efforts of farmers to pivot their businesses in face of the current challenges in the industry that are currently being faced. However, I do want to stress to Council that the district should be cautious in allowing this type of use to be blanketed across all agricultural areas, as often these type of agritourism accommodation uses do grow over time to be the paramount use of an agricultural parcel. For that reason, we do recommend that we uphold the specific use criteria that's been proposed by the Chamber and then also added to the proposed bylaw amendments, and that we ensure that those criteria are going to be conformed with moving forward through the business license process. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes and then Councillor Van Elfen.
Yeah, thank you. So just to clarify, under the ALR regulations, you can't have the accommodation without also having the agritourism activity. So you can't just have the accommodation on its own. And that agritourism activity has to be subordinate to a primary farm function purpose. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Councillor Van Olfen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question through to our planner. Would it be advantageous if I was an applicant to get letters of support from my adjacent neighbors? You know, like, because there's no point in me applying and setting up 3 camping spots if it happens to be across the fence from my neighbor's home. They may get upset. So to do due diligence, I think it would be better if you got letters of support from your adjacent neighbors. It could be a fact that, you know, that's where my neighbor turns his tractor at 5 in the morning when he's spraying his cherries. You know, he may have a concern about that. So I just think letters of support on, you know, the initial application coming in would save a lot of time and headaches possibly.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Van Olfen. That is something that was discussed at the Agriculture Advisory Committee. What we've drafted before council tonight is just a neighborhood notification, not necessarily a requirement for support. That there is a difference between those two things. As a requirement specifically, I think that if you were going to propose this type of use on your farm parcel, you probably would be wise to get those letters of support prior to submitting an application, just because I think that it just would bode well for introducing that type of use into the community or the neighborhood that you're living in. So although I was hesitant to agree to allowing that as a requirement for a letter of support to be a requirement, because that could allow for a potential veto power if there's a neighborhood spat going on, for example. So I think notification is satisfactory, but Graham might have other thoughts.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, I guess what I would say to this is, you know, one of the things we could learn through the pilot is if the notification process works, and, you know, hopefully people are exhibiting good and responsible neighborly activity by listening to one another and these sort of things. But it would, if we required consent, I think it imposes a much higher duty and something that would not be, you know, similar to other types of activities where, you know, people are doing things on their land or building things, or even businesses. You know, requiring that consent really constrains your own ability to use and enjoy your own private property. So I think it's possible we get there in the future if it was shown that the notification process didn't work, but we have good confidence that the notification system could work, or at least we want to trial that out.
I'll go to Councillor Carlson and then back to you two.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. So if this goes forward, who would administer this program? Would it be something that the Chamber of Commerce is responsible for? Who will enforce that the numbers of units and days of stay and all of those things are actually true? And I know that the idea of this isn't new. It's come from what's called Harvest Hosts started in the US. And if you look at their website, they have some Canadian options. So I'm just wondering if maybe, and this might be a question for Mr. Kubik, I see he's on the line, but I'm just wondering how logistically, how this would actually work, so that the district doesn't have to put too many resources into it.
Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, maybe I'll answer, then I'll pass it on to Mr. Kubek if council so chooses to let him speak. I think that because it's a zoning bylaw amendment to our zoning bylaw, we have to be the ones to administer the enforcement side of ensuring that these required criteria of these operations are going to be followed in accordance to the zoning bylaw. So that angle will most likely fall to our bylaw enforcement team, and there will be an impact there within our bylaw enforcement resources, depending on the number of farm operators that obviously take advantage of this proposed use, to ensure that the proposed business, let's say it comes in, is being operated in conformance with what was originally being proposed, to follow up on any complaints that are submitted with regards to noise or fire or whatever type of trespass is another issue that could come up. So we do expect that there will be an impact to our bylaw enforcement team, and we'll have to just manage that as we move forward. And but that and also the administration of the business license and the issuing of a business license, ensuring that it conforms with zoning before we approve it, circulating it to fire department, for example. They're going to be concerned about the number of open fire pits, as well as emergency access to wherever the campground use is being placed. Those would be the things that we would be evaluating internally before we would issue a license. So there would be a little bit of staff time involved with that. But in terms of the marketing and that type of thing, I think that would be more of the Chamber of Commerce taking a role in.
Just to follow up on that, so would, I have some thoughts on how that might look, and I'm just wondering if there might be an opportunity at some point to talk about, farmers need to opt into this program. What about those people who don't want people driving up their driveway and asking if they can come and camp on their land? Like, are we going to have a conversation? Is that a council's place to have a conversation, or is that between the farming community and whoever's administering the program?
Sorry, just to clarify the question. Are you concerned about how the process for people to register?
Well, I'm just okay. Thinking if council says we want to move forward on this, I have some thoughts and sort of important pieces of how it might roll out and what it might look like. I'm just wondering when and if that would be an appropriate conversation to have with council, or is that something that would be between the chamber and staff? Like, I don't want to, give you my whole list of ideas here without it being the right place to do that.
Graham?
Yeah, thank you. And through your worship to Councillor Carlson, I think there's a further opportunity on that level of detail after we go through the hearing process. I think we're going to hear similar questions and concerns and ideas, and indeed some of those things are orbiting in our own minds. Maybe we have a list of people that are participating on the website. Maybe someone has to have a sign at the property line saying, I participate in the such and such program, and information could be handed out, etc. But I think that is a great place where some of this could be gleaned, is from the public sort of hearing process, and council will have a further opportunity at the next time to engage this.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Just before I go on to Councillor Holmes, I just wanted to follow up on something that Councillor Carlson was asking. So the application is essentially an application for a business license, comes into the district. And so the business license fee is payable to the district. I have questions, and we can get to that later, but I have questions about the $50 to $100 payable to the chamber. I'm not sure about that, but if council is in agreement, we can talk to Mr. Kubek about answering that, but not at this point. I want to hear from the other councillors first. Councillor Holmes and then Councillor Van Alphen.
Yeah, thank you. A couple questions, if I may. One, back to the agritourism activity part. So the zoning amendment would cover the accommodation issue, but how do we confirm the activity is taking place and that it's legitimate under the ALR regulations? Is that something that would play into the business license, or how would we know?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So if council remembers from my presentation slides, we already have a existing definition of an agritourism accommodation use. And it specifically references an agritourism activity as defined under the Agricultural Land Use Reserve regulation. So that is how it links into that definition of the land, of the regulation, is through that definition. So when we get a business license, we would, for all of our business licenses, including, we complete a zone review to ensure that that the proposed use that's being contemplated within, say, even if you're in the downtown, if it's a retail use, it conforms with zoning. So in this case, if we got an agritourism accommodation use, we would evaluate the proposal, ensure that there was a valid agritourism activity. We'd probably also engage with Ministry of Agriculture staff to ensure that they define it as an agritourism activity, because there is some gray around that, and make sure that they're comfortable that yes, this is an agritourism activity before we would issue the license.
Yeah, it's kind of like what comes first, the activity or the accommodation. But just another question, if I may. A lot of the farmland in Summerland is leased to other people who farm it, and so how would this apply to that leased land, where the leasee might not want to have farmers on the land, but the owner does?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we would defer to the property owner, as we do with all of our applications. If the owner is wanting to propose this use, we would assume that they have talked with their other lessees. Maybe there's more than one of their property to make them aware that they're proposing this use. That could be something that we add to our proposed agreement that we are proposing to enter into prior to the issuance of a license, just confirming that they've at least had a conversation with their other lessees of their property. But that's a good question. Thank you.
Councillor Van Elfen, and then back to Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Goes back to the farm activity on that farm. So then you would have to be a bona fide farmer as per BC assessment?
That's correct. That's one of the requirements under the land use regulation.
Thank you.
Now you're just making everything very complicated. So what Councillor Holmes just said, I think it brings us back to the point about allowing camping in the farm home plate. I note that that was one of the points on a campground. So I think it's important to recognize that that means generally the landowner, and that farm home plate is not leased out to someone else. But that landowner isn't necessarily a bona fide farmer. So I think it gets a little bit complicated. So you've just put two things together. So, but I, as someone who leases, we lease a lot of orchards, I don't think that there would be any problem with seeing accommodation on a farm home plate. But if all of a sudden someone decides they're going to go and plunk their RV down in the middle of a row or on a side where, we need to access something, then it becomes a very large problem. So I can see there being obviously something to work out there, but I do think we should push for allowing, if this goes forward, then the farm home plate, I think, is a very worthwhile thing to keep in and to move forward further.
Councillor Patton, and then Barco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a separate question. So if this was to move forward tonight to go to public hearing, normal process would be that we wouldn't be back to council until mid-July, if I'm not mistaken. And so what we would be looking at is we're already well into the tourist season where this could be impeded a little bit. If we were to move forward with this, is there any chance that we could look at expediting this?
Through your worship to Councillor Patton, staff have been working diligently to try to bring this forward to council as soon as we can. Following the request from the Chamber of Commerce, the process, unfortunately, to allow this within our zoning bylaw has to go through public hearing under the Local Government Act. So we are required to advertise for that public hearing and then have it in place as well. Because this is a text amendment, we also require Ministry of Transportation's signature between third and adoption. So that would further delay the bylaw from getting adopted. The one thing that we can do, though, is to help alleviate that time frame concern is we could start evaluating proposals right now internally and have them ready for issuance whenever the bylaw does get adopted. So, there would be a time length for us to review a proposal from coming in, circulate that proposal to, like I said, internal departments. Like I mentioned, our fire chief, our works department as examples. We could have that review completed and have the business license and perhaps as well an agreement signed with the owner and ready to go for whenever the bylaw is adopted on that date.
Thank you very much.
If we're looking at a 1-year pilot project, then we have from, say it all falls into place towards the end of July or early August, that does give another pretty full year of accommodations again before September of 2022, right? Because it runs May to September.
Yeah, that's correct, Madam Mayor. So on the question directly, we would probably think of it running to sort of the assessment being done October 2022. So we capture the whole month of September in 2022. So whatever portion of this year, and then a full cycle next year to get a real evaluation. The other thing I was going to suggest, because of this technicality about Minister of Transportation review, what we could do is, as soon as we have that assessment, we could call a quick Zoom meeting of council just to make the final determination and to move forward, so we don't have the additional time between, another council meeting being waiting for that. And in addition to what Brad's talking about, to put people in queue, so we're ready to pull the trigger once things come forward.
Thank you. Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So here it's proposed to put it on farm home plates. So what is the size of the farm home plates? I guess this is a two-part question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if we have a maximum size. I can't even remember off the top of my head. That might be something within the definition of farm home plate. I can't comment on that right now. I'll have to get back to you. Sorry.
I wondered whether it varied with the size of the lot, like a 5-acre lot might have a different home plate, or whether it's the same. I know for my water roll, the home plate is 1/4 of an acre. But that could be something different. So then does every lot, even if it does, like a lot of orchard lots don't have a residence on them, so there's no home plate on those properties, so no camping on those properties? Is that what is contemplated?
Yeah, that's good. Another good question. Thank you through the chair. I would think that we would want to ensure that there was someone living on the property just to maintain a presence of monitoring this type of activity. I think that having a residential use, although we don't specifically require it, I think it would be smart to have it on the property in association with this use, rather than just be a bare land field, because there could be some things that happen.
Well, I mean, what defines the farm home plate? If you were to take any particular property, what are the boundaries of my home plate?
Yeah, through the chair. So I am just pulling up the zoning bylaw here on the fly. So farm home plate means the portion of an agricultural lot that includes a farm residence and any related accessory buildings located in the proximity to the farm residence. So, I don't think there is a size definition. We do have a total I believe, site parcel coverage for buildings within the farm home plate, but in terms of the farm home plate itself, I don't believe we have a size.
So there's no size limitation for, in the definition of a farm home plate.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be half the property.
Yeah, but again,
so it's very subjective, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Could be. Yeah.
My next question. So then, I guess, by that definition, a lot without a house doesn't have a home plate, so there's no camping there. And a winery building only wouldn't have a home plate, would it?
Yeah. Sorry, just to clarify further, I'm again looking at the zoning bylaw. I'm looking now in the details of the zones, and there is maximums for farm home plate sizes, depending on the type of zone you're in.
Okay.
So A1 is 905 meters squared. I apologize there, Council Barkwell.
What's that in acres?
I can't do that math on the fly.
It's about
905 meters squared. Someone can Google it. And so for A2, it's larger. It's 1,200 meters squared.
I don't think it's very big. Sorry. I guess I'm kind of old school. Maybe it's good for Councillor Carlson, but it doesn't help me.
Madam Mayor, the question, square meters to acres, was it?
Yeah.
905 square meters is 0.22363
so
acres.
A quarter acre. So that's not very much
If my math
space.
is correct off the top of my head.
So that was, and then 1,200 on a 10, on a larger lot was?
On a A2. zone
A2,
parcel.
which is anything over 10 acres?
Yeah, that's correct.
Actually, though, a lot of things, parcels can be smaller and still have that classification, can't they?
We have some historical ones, I
Yeah.
believe, that are zoned A2 that are
Yeah.
smaller.
So, okay, so it's got to be on the farm home plate and it's got to draw some boundaries that fit within that area. And what about, if a lot has a winery building and no residents, I guess there's no home plate. And that would seem like a good place to park some motorhomes for the night, is in a parking lot of a winery.
Yeah.
And they would, so I wonder how we can accommodate that. And
Yeah, the requirement for a farm home to be added to the proposed regulations came from the Agriculture Advisory Committee. It wasn't initially in the staff drafted amendments. I think that the idea behind it is we would limit the amount of encroachment into the agricultural property. I believe the Ministry of Agriculture also supported that inclusion. I agree with your comments there, Councillor Barkwell, that there could be circumstances where it would be better sited in another location. And I guess that would require a development variance permit to be considered by council at that time.
yeah, I can see a lot of situations where it might be better to not be 10 meters back, like I'm thinking of one right now, where it would be good if they parked close to the road, and that would actually save space, and it's just temporary for the vehicle to be there overnight. So there's just so many wrinkles, but at least maybe with this we can get a start. My other question was concerning power, because the Agricultural Land Commission's rules, no permanent infrastructure additions or something. And I would think that power, just, would have to be underground power supply, would be prohibited by the Agricultural Land Commission's rules.
No, it was recommended that the installation of no permanent infrastructure be installed, but with this use, power is that's something that council could consider as part of a proposal that comes in. Some of the comments this came from the Advisory Planning Commission in terms of allowing power was the use of generators being a noise impact. So they originally, we did state no permanent infrastructure in the proposed amendments, and there was a bit of a discussion at the Advisory Planning Commission to avoid the use of generators through the use of campground, through the installation of power, if the operator so chooses.
Yeah, it gets expensive, so it's going to have to be their decision, I suppose.
It totally would be. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Elfen.
May I put the motion on the floor, Madam Mayor?
Sure, if there are no other questions, please go ahead.
Thank you. That zoning bylaw amendment, agritourism accommodation bylaw number 2021-020 be read a first and second time, and that a public hearing be held on July 12, 2021 to receive public feedback on zoning bylaw amendment, agritourism accommodation bylaw number 2021-020.
Thank you, Councillor Van Elfen. Seconder, Councillor Patton. Any further discussion? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As our Director of Development Services was talking about, is there something in that motion that we could direct staff to begin application intake for this prior to public hearing? Or should we wait until public hearing? Yeah, I guess, is there any, I guess my question being is there any legalities that we could fall into if we were to get ahead of ourselves? Maybe that's a better question for our corporate officer.
You please go ahead, Karen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I think because this is a public process and we are forwarding this to a public hearing to hear from the public, I would recommend that Council wait to go through that process and see what happens following the public hearing. And should there be a period of time where we have to go to the Ministry of Transportation, should the bylaw be given third reading, then at that point, I think it would be safe for staff to start collecting applications.
Excellent. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, it sounds like a prudent way to go. Councillor Carlson, you had your hand up, and then on to Councillor Holmes.
Just, I mean, if people want to start their own planning process and putting together what they would consider their application, I'm sure they could. We just wouldn't necessarily accept them until we know if this is moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's worth looking at this as a pilot over 2 summers, not just this summer. And if this goes ahead, we can make any tweaks and fine tuning after that second summer to see how it goes. And I think also it would give people time to get their agritourism activity together, because they'll need that before they can have their accommodation. So that's a lot of stuff to get for somebody to pull together. I think this, I support this going to a public hearing. I think it has a lot of potential. I know in Europe they do it. In France, I'm not sure how well it works with Anglo-Saxons coming, because farm is spelt the same way as firm closed. And so Anglo-Saxons come and see camping farm, thinking that it's closed, and then they keep driving, but that shouldn't be a problem here. So I'll support the motion, and I thank the chamber for bringing this forward. Thanks.
Councillor Carlson.
Just one thing. Would it be possible to run this through Thanksgiving weekend instead of the end of September? I know we said May to September, but I think that really apple harvest finishes up and grapes are still being crushed up until Thanksgiving, and that's when it gets cool and the water gets turned off.
Thank you. I certainly thank you, Councillor Carlson, through the mayor. From my perspective, I think what you're raising makes sense. I know that September had come up in other conversations, but we have room to move on that. And certainly there's some nice fall weather and activities that extend into the fall. So I think it's something we could take back and look at. I'm just going to give Brad the opportunity to disagree with me in case he'd like to.
So just to clarify with council, it does state within the proposed bylaw amendments that are on the floor right now, that the specific use regulation says May to September. I don't think that regardless of that being written within the bylaw that we would take a hard stance on that. We would probably give a few weeks or maybe a month even to allow an operator to close their business with a timeline, and our enforcement staff would be on top of that. However, we know we're willing to consider friendly amendments as well to the proposed bylaw, perhaps before council, if council is willing to consider a friendly amendment to the draft.
That's why I brought it up now before we vote, so we don't miss it.
Do we have to do a friendly amendment because it's not even in the proposed, it's not even the resolution? Yes, we do.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe that it's in the bylaw as proposed, so we could amend the bylaw at first. You could give it first reading, amend the bylaw, and then give it second reading.
Okay, good. So, but we already have first and second reading on the floor. So, can we just split it into first reading or? Okay. And who put it on the floor? Was it Councillor Van Alphen? Thank you. You're open to that friendly amendment? Thank you. Okay, so we'll vote on the amendment then, unless there's any further discussion. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm wondering, we've had Mr. Kubik has been on waiting for us patiently. I'm not sure, would it be council's will to have him speak to us, or I'm just wondering.
If council has any questions, then we can ask if council would like to hear from Mr. Kubek, but it would be out of process to invite Mr. Kubek to speak to us.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Barkwell.
Yes, I'm just wondering what this amendment is, because actually when I had the same thoughts as Councillor Carlson, I would have even have thrown April in and all the way to the end of October, because developing our shoulder seasons is something that we want to do. And that those are the shoulder seasons. So what is the amendment? How is the amendment worded? Are we going just to the Thanksgiving or to the end of October?
That would be a question to ask our corporate officer. What the amendment shows, reads, I mean. Oh, pardon me. Do you, Councillor Carlson, do you want to provide some wording on the amendment part of it, extending the season from September? You're the one that brought it up.
Yeah, you want me to put my microphone on? Oh, I don't know if we need to necessarily have people camping when the water goes off. Do we? I mean, that's part of the, I guess that would be part of my concern, but they're not necessarily using the water. So
Yeah.
maybe we say April 15th until the end of October, but I do think that gets pretty cold. So if people, I mean, most campsites and campgrounds close at the end of September, right? And that's part of the challenge and why I suggested we go till Thanksgiving, because people still want to go camping at Thanksgiving. But I think beyond that, it's pretty cold and people aren't necessarily wanting to camp anymore. But if it makes no difference, then we can go April through October.
There is a difference between camping and camping in an RV that's heated and winterized. But your point about the water being shut off, oh no, that's agricultural water, so it doesn't apply. So I still don't kind of have an answer from you.
April to October is fine. It does seem like a long time, but if it doesn't affect any other way. Graham?
Graham?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Councillor Carlson. So I would suggest that council would set the bookends to be beginning of April to the end of October and let demand regulate the season as part of the learning process. What I will say As the former Assistant Deputy Minister of Alberta's provincial park system with 20,000 campsites in our provincial parks, people in Thanksgiving, long weekend, were mad that we shut down the reservation system after Thanksgiving long weekend because the way the units are these days with 3-season, 4-season, self-contained. And I can't imagine, not knowing, further to Councillor Holmes' question about preparing the agricultural activities. We are starting a little later than we hoped this year. The agriculture tourism activities, perhaps harvest, and sort of potential festivals or events associated with that, including vegetable and other harvests, beyond fruit, I think could, ice wine. I mean, I don't know. You could see some, we wouldn't want to hinder the potential there, not knowing what could come from this. So I would suggest to Council April 1st to the end of October inclusive for the time period.
Okay, back to you now, Corporate Officer, with your amended resolution.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So what we have now is that zoning bylaw, agritourism accommodation bylaw number 2021-020 be read a first time, and that the bylaw be amended at first reading by changing the proposed time frame to read beginning of April to end of October, and that zoning bylaw amendment agritourism accommodation bylaw 2021-020 be read a second time as amended, and that a public hearing be held on July 12th, 2021 to receive public feedback on the bylaw number 2021-020.
Thank you. That's okay with you, Councillor Van Elfen, and who seconded that? I didn't write it down. Councillor Patton, that's okay with you, so you're seconding again. Okay, further discussion? All in favor? And I don't see any hands raised for opposed, so that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Thanks for all your hard work on that, Brad. And I'm not sure if Mr. Kubek is still on the line, but for bringing that forward, it's whatever we can do is worthwhile, I think. Okay, so now on to adoption of zoning bylaw amendments for 7418 Kirk Avenue. Could someone bring that forward? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The zoning bylaw amendments to 7418 Kirk Avenue, bylaw number 2021-019 be adopted.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Van Elfen. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. And now on to item 12.1, notice of motion, and I will pass the mic on to Councillor Traynor.
Thank you. So I did give council a heads up about this about a week ago. I'm hoping to bring forward a notice of motion while I am tonight, that council officially dedicate the funds that the district collects from the sale of the properties along Landry Crescent between the homes and the waterfront to 4 specific items. And CAO, is it okay if I read those out now then? Okay. So using the funds from the sales to restore the Mary and James Gartrell Trail, we currently have about $40,000 in the budget for much needed repair work, but we will need more than that to complete the job. Secondly, using the funds to revitalize the sanctuary that's located along the trail between the townhouses on Landry and the new proposed development west of that. This would likely involve contracting a biologist who could help identify what needs to be done in this area, removing invasive species and garbage, planting native plants, and rebuilding the trail through that section as well. That area is actually dedicated as parkland right now, and I don't believe it's ever had any attention to it. So using the funds for that. Installing a doggy bag dispenser and garbage can along the trail, similar to what the district's done in other areas of where we have our parks. And finally, installing signs at the entrances to the trail along Landry Crescent that officially mark the trail, let people know what they're walking onto, and including some Indigenous history or name for Trout Creek area as well on that trail. I know some members of the public were upset with the sale of those pieces of land along Landry, and normally I wouldn't support selling public land on the waterfront, and I really struggled with that. But in the end, I thought that because we were dealing with such tiny pieces of property and that the area was already quite disturbed, that using funds from the sale could help improve the trail that we do have right now and the sanctuary, and that would be more beneficial in the long run. So that is my notice of motion, and I believe it will be reworded so that it reads properly and brought forward at a meeting in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Traynor. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to I'd second that for sure, but just a friendly amendment or a thought, if I may. Part of the signage, could it also read that it's an on-leash trail, not an off-leash trail? Because my concern there is the sanctuary. There's a lot of different species that live in that sanctuary, different birds, different aquatic type life, and I think it's not a great place to have dogs just running at large. So I think it would be something that at the beginning of the trail that we have a sign saying dogs are on leash in that area. If that would be okay, if Councillor Traynor would entertain that idea.
So my understanding is that the motion actually hasn't been made yet. It's coming forward to the next meeting. That's fine. That's fine. And certainly next meeting, there will be lots of time to have that discussion. I understand your concern there.
I'm just overzealous. Sorry, Madam.
No need to apologize. Thank you again, Councillor Traynor. Did you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, I think tonight I just wanted to give council, let them know what I was thinking for this motion that will officially come forward in 2 weeks. And the real concept here is dedicating the funds from that sale right back to the area that's affected along the trail and the sanctuary. So that was my whole idea is really making sure that we use that money and putting it back into the local area.
Great, thank you. Okay, on to item 13, information items. There are a number of pieces of correspondence. Anything that someone would like to bring forward? Okay, to receive for information, somebody, Councillor Patton, seconder, Councillor Carlson, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And then a whole lot of committee and commission minutes dating back a ways. Anything, well, it's so, I mean, unless you have an amazing memory, not sure if there is anything in there that doesn't really reflect the record properly. Does anyone have anything they want to say about any of those minutes? Okay, I'll ask someone to bring forward those then, please. Thank you, Councillor Van Elfen, and seconded by Councillor Barkwell. All in favor? Thank you. So those are in the public record now. And now on to councillor reports. I'm going to start with you, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not a lot to report tonight. I just wanted to touch on something you said in your report on the West Summerland Station. Rotary has done a fabulous job there, but I just wanted to bring it forward. I remember when they were building it, and I went and saw my friend George Giannotti, and he had the original sign in his garage, West Summerland Station, and he happily donated that and it is now on that building. And it says that's the original sign from the original West Summerland station because his dad worked on that railroad. And when they tore that building down, George went and salvaged that sign as memory of his father. And now it's back on the building. So thank you.
Thank you. That's a great story. I really like that. Thank you for sharing that. Councillor Barkwell.
Well, I don't have any good stories like that. No report.
Okay, Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. Just as you mentioned in your report regarding the Okanagan Nation Alliance workshop this morning, I found it really excellent, and I'm glad that they plan to be doing more. It really gave everybody a lot to think about, I think, and just this whole concept that I think Indigenous people have spent a lot of time understanding the non-Indigenous systems, legal systems, and everything like that, because it's been imposed on them. And what we need now is for non-Indigenous people to learn and understand Indigenous knowledge systems. And I think this is kind of what this is all part of, and it's a long road, and but we got to start somewhere. So I thought that was it was an excellent thing, and I'm glad they're continuing. And other than that, I'm looking forward to stepping into step 2, starting tonight.
At 12:01 a.m. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have no stories, and I have nothing to report, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson.
I too have nothing to report, but I am grateful to have seen the rain this weekend. It was much needed, and hopefully we can have a little bit more in the next couple of weeks.
Now that I got my hay off, yes.
Councillor Trainer.
I attended the RDOS meeting as did Councillor Holmes on June 3rd, and I'm just rereading my report to see if there's anything interesting that came out of it. So it is interesting. So if you want to read what we discussed on June 3rd, my report is in the correspondence, attachment G. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Trainer. There were a number of RDOS directors at this workshop this morning too, so it was great. Okay. Always hopeful that maybe there's somebody that wants to comment. No? Okay. Okay. Okay, so adjournment. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Patton, all in favor? Thank you.
Short, sweet.